Welcome to From Head to Heart and Home. We're excited to have you listen in on our conversation. This is a channel created by women, empowering women to take intentional action to create the life that they want. With your hosts, Shanda Soretti, transformational coach, and Carla Center, relationship coach. So today we've got a juicy topic, surrounded around the holidays. We're in that holiday season, and there's always little dramas that can happen. It can be such a stressful time of year. So today we wanted to talk about that holiday drama. You know how you're running around trying to make sure everything's done, everybody's happy. You really do have some control. And I'm going to let Shanda introduce it a little bit more.
Yeah, so we are talking about typically family drama, right? This is typically where we experience it the most because sometimes we get to spend time with people we might not agree with, we might not get along with because they're family, right? We end up in the same rooms and sometimes drama can really creep in here. So I think one of the best things that I ever heard, and I'm just going to start it off with this big bang, was from one of my mentors. And she said she finds it strange how we act surprised when people show up and do the things that we know they will do, right? We act surprised or shocked when people behave the way that they've always behaved. So if there's someone in your family, in your life that you will be spending time with, whether it's the Thanksgiving in the States. Canada, we already had ours last month, but it is the USA Thanksgiving, which is what we're talking about here. But this also applies to Christmas coming up too, right? We're right as of the day of this recording, we're just less than a month away from the holidays, the Christmas holidays. So take this and apply it forward as well. So what we mean here is when you are around these people, you're brushing shoulders with people, you're in rooms with people that you might not always get along with. Let's first of all just be aware and honest about how we know they will likely behave. Now, they might not, they might surprise us in a different way and show up completely different. But let's just assume that they're not. They're going to show up the way that they've always shown up. Okay? So, the first thing to do is to not be surprised when someone behaves the way that they've always behaved. I'm just going to start there.
Right. Right. And when somebody behaves the way they've always behaved, are you reacting the same way as you've always reacted?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where these patterns continue on in our lives. Or have you stepped back and gone, okay, I recognize this. I should have been aware that this is what was going to happen based on our past. How can I react differently? How can I see this differently and move forward? So this isn't the way I spend this holiday, this time with family every time.
Mm-hmm.
Is are people like super sensitive, and you know that they feel insecure, and so they like a lot of attention and you feel left out?
Mm.
Is it, I mean, there's all kinds of things, but we have control.
Yeah.
We think we don't have control of somebody else's behavior, but we 100% have control over our actions and reactions in these things. And families have patterns. I mean, it just is. We've come together for years, sometimes decades. It just really depends on your family and dynamics. Unless somebody shifts, and that's where you have the control, you can shift. This is
Mm-hmm.
not about teaching somebody else how to act differently.
Yeah.
This is about you and how you react to them. Or like, I know if I show up at this time, this is what's going to happen, and always upsets me. Or if I talk to this person about somebody else, I know how it's all going to go down. Like, we can be super aware if we look at what is my behavior at these places,
Mm-hmm.
not to be critical of yourself, but to be like, okay, I have control of this.
Yeah.
Let's have some awareness about it so that I can have a better time than I've had in the past, because I really want to enjoy this celebration instead of being like, I'll just make it through And hopefully there's not a lot of aftermath.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's really powerful here, and this is why we're talking about this, because we were sharing personal stories before we pressed record. And this is kind of where the inspiration for this conversation came from. And I was sharing with Carla that I had an experience lately, just a few weeks ago, with family. And I had acted in a way that, typically I'd be like, oh, yeah, shoot, I kind of dropped the ball there. I behaved in a way that I wasn't overly proud of, right? And I'm human, and that's okay. So I forgive myself and I've let it go. But I've also apologized too for my behavior. But when you take ownership, right, of your behavior and of your actions, it actually feels really surprisingly good. um, when you take that control, you take that ownership, and you're like, yeah, maybe I've been showing up to this relationship in this type of way. And maybe I've actually been contributing to this relationship and perpetuating this relationship, right? How am I adding fuel to this fire, right? Do I want to keep adding fuel to this fire, or do I want to show up differently? Like Carla said so beautifully, don't expect other people to do the work. Don't expect other people to change. That's where you get to do it. You get to be like, all right, you know what? Regardless of anybody else, I want to change for myself. I want to change myself for the better, for myself and for everyone involved, right? So when you ask yourself, like, how can I choose to show up differently? What could that look like? How might I behave? Right? And what can help is if you would visualize off into the future and a time where you're like, okay, in the future, I can see myself mending a relationship, healing a relationship, having a good, healthy relationship with this person. And you see your future self out there in the distance, and you close your eyes, you visualize her, and you picture her or him, and you pay attention to how that future self is showing up in that relationship, in that room with that person. How is she behaving? What are the thoughts she's thinking? What are the feelings she's feeling, right? How is she
Mhm.
being? That is your nugget or your tip into the things that you get to work on. So you bring that information back with you, and then you start asking, okay, how can I start to work on this now? How can I integrate these pieces into my life today so that I can work toward that future self?
Right. And it gives you a chance to like practice conversations in your mind, not so that you have to have those conversations, but you can start creating in your brain pathways where different responses happen for you. And then you're not sitting there like, oh, I don't want to respond how I normally do. How would the person I visualize respond? You can create like, oh yeah, you know what? I've really like practiced being who I want to be in this situation, how I want to be in this relationship. And it's become so much more natural because you're creating new um, pathways, neural pathways with your brain while you're doing what Shanda was just talking about. And if you practice, like, okay, what would he or she respond like? What would they do? What would they say? What would they think? And it's really helpful. And I've had to do that. I recently have had a few things happen, and I was like, where's my responsibility? I didn't have a boundary. I left my energy open, and then I blamed it on them because they made a different choice. My first thought was, oh, and then I'm like, nope, that's me. That's
Mm.
me. And I took full responsibility, and it kept me from going down the path of look at how horrible I feel and rejected and all of this stuff, because those are the things that happen with us and that starts to spiral.
Mm.
But when we step back and take responsibility, we don't create those feelings in ourselves, or
Mm.
we catch them when they start so that they don't start spinning and growing. And one of the most beautiful things one of my children said to me was, I was thinking about how stressful the holidays are and trying to be everywhere. And I'm going to choose what's best for me and my kids. And I wasn't that way. And that's not how I taught her. I taught her try and make sure everybody feels seen and heard. And you're so exhausted from the holidays that you barely connect with anybody. you don't really have the connection, and the certain things will still happen. They always have happened in the past because I didn't change. But I do know what I went home tired, frustrated, and not feeling like I treated anybody with love, but they all knew I loved them because I was there, because I made an appearance, right? So
Hmm.
what I would have done differently is like, hey, what would feel like a time I could connect with somebody, sit down and really have conversations, instead of being like, um, I have to watch the time. I don't even know what you just said. I can guess what
Yeah.
you said, and then here's my normal reaction.
Right. Yeah. Like being present, right? There's a difference between being there and being
Mhm.
present versus
Right.
presence, something like that, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I have a saying that I use. It's like my saying that I use within my business, my slogan, if you will. Be the person today you'll be proud of tomorrow, right?
Right.
So show up today, even when it's hard, even when you don't want to, but show up today for yourself in a way that you'll be proud of tomorrow. A simple way to do this is to ask yourself this beautiful question, okay? Will my future self thank me for this action, for this choice? Right? And when it comes to rewiring the neural pathways, it's going to take work. But to create a new experience, we need to make new choices, right? New
Right.
decisions. So imagine this for a second. I want you to understand how powerful and how impactful this can be. Imagine that the thing happens, right? Imagine the thing playing out exactly as you think it will, exactly as it always has, but it doesn't bother you anymore. Imagine being completely neutral to whatever is happening around you. That, my friend, is true power, right?
Yes.
Not being affected by external things, external situations, circumstances, experiences. Okay. So this is what we're encouraging you to do. And it will take practice and it will take work. And like you were saying, Carla, the whole being present thing and those creating those true connections. Um, it's so important because when we try to spread ourselves so thin, we aren't present and we're not giving the highest quality of ourselves to people. They're not experiencing our highest self. And that's what we want to be giving to people. So if you know that you don't have the capacity to attend 3 suppers, 3 get-togethers in one day, then don't do it. You can politely decline. You can reschedule. You can say, hey, I can't make it there at this date and time, but how about we have a smaller thing this date and time, right? Like you can negotiate, um you can be resourceful. And I love the word resourceful because sometimes we're so black and white in our thinking where it's like if it's not this then it doesn't happen at all. And it's like, well, like what's the wiggle room? Like what are some other opportunities? What are some other possibilities that we could create something similar and that maybe is less people, maybe it's after the holidays, whatever, right? But stay open to possibilities, make it work for you, and that comes down to having those healthy boundaries and honoring them, sticking to them.
Right. And from that comes compassion and love, instead of guilt, shame, and resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
which are some of the things that happen in around the holidays. And then we're like, ooh, like you're frustrated. But if you allow yourself to be resourceful, things don't have to be a certain way. Don't take any kind of guilt because you didn't do things that were the way they were done in the past. Just be like, okay, what are some new things I can create, like Shanda was saying, and know that guilt is a manipulation of
Mm.
your thought, your actions, and your emotions. And you can step back and go, something's not right if I'm feeling this.
Yeah.
I am feeling it. I know I am, but I know that there's something else going on, and I'm not going to make my decision based off of that, because that's going to lead to resentment,
Mm.
and I want to feel love and compassion towards the people in my life.
Mm.
And so what is going to create that instead of the guilt and resentment that has created the same patterns over and over again.
Yeah. And I think what helps me too sometimes is if we remember, we go back to something that we talk about often, where it's our external world is a reflection of our internal world and what's happening within us. So if we can understand the idea that everything in our life is happening for us, for our evolution, so that we can evolve to our highest self, then the most difficult things in our lives are actually bringing the biggest gifts. So that includes the most difficult people, the most difficult relationships. So, what I like to try and do is find compassion for that person. And again, this can take some mental work, but it's worth it because it's
It
like I
is.
like to ask myself, like, how can I love this person? And that might be a great big question for some people, right? And it is. And I'm asking you to stretch yourself into opening up to this question. How can I love this person? And an easy way for me to be able to do that is I look for bits and pieces of myself inside of them. Like, what is the commonality between us that we have? It might be so small, but there is something. There's always something that we have in common. No matter who this person is, you can always find something. And that right there creates that bridge, that connection point for you to be able to start to do that change work and see things from a different perspective to have a different experience and different outcome.
It's beautiful. And people feel seen when you find those commonalities.
Yeah.
And you'll be amazed at what that creates between the two of you when you
Mhm.
have found that commonality and are coming from that compassion and love towards somebody that maybe you're like, ugh. And then things change. You notice a difference in them because there's a difference in you and how you are connecting and relating to them.
Yeah. And like what the question that just came up for me is like, how can I let go of this negative emotion that I'm experiencing, right? Because it's a negative emotion that we're having towards this other person. It's a negative thought. Ask yourself, like, be truly honest. What is the value in me letting go of this negativity? What's the value in that? There is a lot. I will be spoiler alert here, right? There's a ton because you're the only one carrying that negativity around with you. They might not even know, it might not even affect them, and they might not even care. And any of those options are true and valid and okay, right? They're neutral. So, what is the value in you letting go of your negativity, in you letting go of that pain? Be willing to choose your happiness over your pain, right? And that involves hard choices sometimes. And it involves doing things that we don't normally do sometimes. But it's always worth it.
Right. Right. And it's empowering yourself to create something different than you have created in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think forgiveness is like the biggest part. And we always talk about forgiveness because it's forgiveness of self. Forgive yourself for holding on to that anger and that pain and perpetuating it, right? Because you're the one perpetuating it. Nobody else is perpetuating it. Our thoughts, what we're thinking creates the pain that we're feeling. So, what would it take for you to let go of it? What do you need to give yourself or allow yourself in order to let go of that story that you're telling yourself? Start there. Go to your journal, get out a piece of paper, meditate on it, go for a walk, whatever you need to do, but spend some time in those thought provoking questions and be open to answers you may have never heard before and answers you might not even like for that matter, right? Because it's uncomfortable rewriting stories. It's uncomfortable admitting things. It's uncomfortable letting go of certain things because we can start to identify with these things. And then we start asking, who are we without this story? But there's so much power, there's so much freedom in taking ownership, taking control, and being the person that you'll be proud of tomorrow.
Right. That's beautiful. And I was just going to talk about freedom and power. So just
Mm,
remember when you're like reflecting and letting go of the negativity, like Shanda was talking about, you are really giving yourself power and freedom. It's not about forgiveness. We always equal forget like it never happened. It's
right.
empower giving you Think of it as allowing yourself to have power and freedom over your life, over your choices, over your thoughts, over what you create in the future, so that those things aren't holding you in the same patterns and path that you are not enjoying.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you guys all have some work to do. All right. And again, this is beautiful because you can use this not just in a holiday, during a holiday, around holidays, not just for the upcoming Christmas holidays, but this anytime that you're getting together with a large group of people, a large group of family, or with people that, again, you might not enjoy spending a lot of time with. This is where the work begins. So get out your pens and paper and get to work.
Right. Beautifully said. And if for some reason you're feeling like some of it you could use some support on, reach out to Shanda or I, or write your questions down in the comments. We're always here to support the best we can. And remember, you are the one who is in charge of your life.
Mm.
You get to create the life you want. And we will continue to create things to share with you so that you feel empowered to make different choices, to be curious about what else can happen in your life. And down below, besides the subscription button, if you haven't
Mhm.
pushed it, push it. You'll find the ways to contact us. We have great stuff on our social media as well. If you want to look things up or reach out to us, if you want to share this with somebody else or any of our episodes, please just share from YouTube. We have great stuff. If you haven't watched all of them, if this is the first time, there are many great tidbits in our episodes. We are here to make a difference in your life and support you. And we will be back next week with another exciting conversation. Bye bye for now.